many moons ago. We were both roommates, and we both were involved with a church called New City Fellowship in St. Louis. And it had a significant impact on both of our lives. We were actually, while we were in seminary, we were both members of this church, and we were both deacons. We became deacons at this church while we were there, while we were in seminary. And we were also roommates, believe it or not. We lived in the city on a place called Etzel Avenue. Etzel rhymed with pretzel. Okay? And it was quite a place. It was a great experience for both of our lives in terms of just understanding the city, understanding things like race, understanding the gospel, understanding what it means to be a Christian in seminary, where your mind is being filled with all this grandiose theology, and then what does that mean practically to help widows and mothers, single moms and orphans. And it was an amazing experience. And so we shared in that. And one of the stories I want to say before Mark comes up is that as you get to know Mark, you just see his heart for the Lord. And before he had asked Lori to marry him, I just remember living in our apartment, and Mark would wake up early in the morning, and there was kind of like a little room that faced the street. We were on the third floor of this apartment, and he would go out there and he would pray. He would pray very early in the morning, and it was kind of through those prayers. I remember him specifically praying about Lori, should I marry her? Like, Lord, would you reveal, your will to me? And through that prayer, so guys, prayer and women go together. And so it's just really neat to see that relationship form. And they had some mutual interests. Number one, in Jesus, in His kingdom, and they were both going to a place called Peru a lot on these mission trips. They had this mutual interest to do missions and to go to Peru. And through those mutual interests, through that faith in the Lord, God threw them together, and they fell in love with each other, and now they're married, and they have 5 kids. And which is a really wonderful thing. And then RUF Maryland, we had the opportunity, you guys weren't here, but 3 or 4 years ago, we had the opportunity to go to Peru, and actually landed on that trip. And it was an amazing trip. They have been in Lima, Peru for the last 15 years or so, serving with a ministry called MTW, Mission to the World, planting a church, and now that church has a Peruvian pastor there, and they've done just amazing work down there. It's really wonderful to see God's kingdom come. And so I would love for you to have a chance this weekend, to get to know Mark and Lori, and they're going to be around here, and so feel free to this weekend is about relationships, part of it, and getting to know people and talking to people, and so feel free to talk to them, ask them questions, get to know their kids. They're our family, okay, for these few days. And so with that, we ask Mark to come up and share the word. Thank you, brother. You want to go there, or want this over here, Fred? Yeah, probably over the money.
All right. Hey, it is great to be with you guys this evening. As Chris said, we go way back, and it was exciting to get his invitation a couple months ago to be able to come and speak to you guys over this weekend. I actually was born in Baltimore. I'm native of Maryland. Only lived there for 2 years. And the rest of my life has been a lot of moving around. So it's fun to be able to be with you guys, many of you from that state. And as Chris mentioned also, the last 2 days we've been driving. We've been on the road for most of the last 2 days. And so I know you guys are having a little trip today too, so probably everybody's a little bit worn out. So, but I hope that tonight that the Lord will refresh us with the Word. And I'm really looking forward to, with Lori, our family, to be able to spend these few days with you guys. It's going to be a joy to get to know you. I hope that, as Chris said, that we will have chances to talk. I know some of you guys may have interest in thinking about wanting to know more about what we've done, what was the path to going to another country and working in missions. Love to talk about that all the time. And just remember well the place where you guys are, thinking about your lives, about where you're headed, what God's doing, and just excited about to be a part of it, at least in a small way this weekend. I hope we can encourage one another in the Lord. I want to start off sharing a little something about myself. Is that one of the things that, one of my little hobbies, I guess you could say, I don't have that many hobbies, but one thing I love to do is watch the news. And increasingly less so because it's often so bad. And, like when we lived in Peru, that none of the local news is censored. And so we really could never watch it because they would have, they would be showing blood literally in the streets of murders and things like this. But here, I watch different news programs and follow it. Sometimes it's so negative that I don't want to do that. But I saw something very interesting not too long ago on the internet, and this little thing came across. Some of you guys may have seen this. It was totally different. It was some really great news. And so what it was this guy, this kind of filmmaker, amateur filmmaker. I think he was out in California someplace. And he decided to do this, to put together this video in which he was going to give money to a homeless person and then film and see what the person did with the money. And so he approaches this guy, and you see it. He approaches the guy, says, "I want to give you some money." The guy's carrying a bag on the street. And then he goes off and kind of hides, and you see the guy, kind of make this beeline, goes across the street, different place, and goes into this liquor store. And so he's filming the whole time, and the guy's in there for a little while, and comes back out, and he's got another couple bags he's carrying with him. And this guy's filming the whole time. He walks back across the street, goes over to this park, and he begins pulling out of his bag. Some of you guys may have seen this. Pulls out of his bag food. And he's going basically to these other homeless people. And he had gone and used the money in that store, which was, like I said, mini market, and had food as well as alcohol. And he begins to pass it out to these folks at these different parks and the picnic tables. And so this guy who's filming him runs up to him, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" The man responds to him that way. He said, "I have to confess something to you. That the only reason I gave you that money is because I wanted to film you." And he's like, "Yeah, you thought I'd go buy liquor or stuff like that, right?" He's like, "No, man." He said, a lot of people are just out here on the streets because," he said, "in my case, I was living with my mom. She died. I couldn't keep up the home, and I just didn't have a job." And he's saying there's a lot of people like that. He kind of shared, and he wasn't, that offended. He kind of just sort of took it in stride in one sense. But it was really unbelievable. So the guy, the filmmaker, said, pulls out another $50. Just, "I want you to have this. Bless me." That's great news. That was just this thing where you kind of had this concept, this expectation that of a cynic. And the guy was kind of cynical and thinking about it. And I know that we get that way too. But that's just this example of just unbelievable good news. That a guy would take money like that in his situation and want to share that with other people. And that's what this passage that we're going to look at tonight is about. It's about, what we're going to talk about tonight is the best news ever. The best news that has ever been heard in any way, shape, or form. And so if you have a Bible, we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 52, verses 7 through 10. I'm going to read this for us right now. Isaiah 52, 7 through 10. And, or if you've got it on your phone, power up your Bible. And take a look at that. Isaiah 52, verses 7 through 10. It says, "How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who publishes peace, who brings good news of happiness, who publishes salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. The voice of your watchmen, they lift up their voice. Together they sing for joy, for eye to eye they see the return of the Lord to Zion. Break forth together into singing in the waste places of Jerusalem. For the Lord has comforted his people. He has redeemed Jerusalem. The Lord has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. This is the word of the Lord. We're going to bow our heads and close our eyes and pray. And what I'd like to ask you to do is we're going to pray for our people that are on our right side and our left side, just the person that's there to your right, to your left. And this is what we're going to pray, that the good news would make that person's heart sing tonight, this weekend. Okay, so for the person on your right, pray that the good news of the gospel would make their heart sing. And now for the person on your left. And the second thing you're going to pray, first for the person on your right, is that God would fill them with joy in sharing that good news with others. God would fill them with joy in sharing that good news with others. Now for the person on your left. And so we do, Father, pray that you would give us hearts and open to hear, to understand, and ears to hear the good news of the gospel, Lord, in new ways tonight, this weekend, and that it would become a song in our heart, Lord, and that we would, Lord, be able to know not just the words of the gospel, but the music, hear it, and not just walk to its beat, but dance, sing, and dance with joy because of how good this news is. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're going to look at three things tonight in this passage about this best news ever. First thing is that it is so beautiful that it has to be sung. Second thing is that it is delivered in the flesh. And the third thing is that it is for everyone. I want to give you a little background about this particular passage. Sometimes the prophets are a little bit complex to understand, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's difficult for us pastors sometimes to discern a lot of the depths that's here in terms of some of the background of these passages. But one of the things I want to tell you is Isaiah was prophesying in Judah. Israel, the people of God, were two different nations, Israel and Judah. Israel was to the north. Judah was to the south. He prophesied about 7 centuries before Christ came, in the year 760, 700 BC. And he prophesied during the reigns of several different kings. One was Uzziah, Ahaz, Hezekiah. These were famous kings if you read in Kings and Chronicles about them. These were times of a lot of political turmoil in which he prophesied. So you think about a person like Isaiah. He's a preacher, he's a pastor. He's preaching to people that many that are just very hard-hearted, not responsive to his ministry. So there's times they're living in times of a lot of chaos and political upheaval. Some good times, but a lot of problematic times, and problematic times that are coming. And so, in this particular passage, what's happening is that sometime in Isaiah's life, the northern kingdom of Israel gets taken away into exile by the kingdom of Assyria, which was the biggest player on the scene at that time. And then Isaiah is also seeing in his prophecies that the southern kingdom, Judah, the one he's in, is going to get taken away by Babylon at some point. And this is because of their behavior towards God, their rebelliousness constant towards God, rejecting his word and not responding to him. And so in this particular passage, he's seeing, and in the prophecies, a lot of times there's this thing they call telescoping, where he's seeing out into the future, but he's seeing multiple sort of layers out into the future. So not only does this passage we just read kind of include the fact that he's knowing that Israel's getting ready to get taken into exile, he knows that Judah's going to get taken, a couple of 100 years later, 150 years later, and then he's also seeing them returning. And we know that in the books, that's what happens. 70 years after they're in exile, for 70 years, then they come back. They start coming back. So he's seeing that, but it doesn't just stop there. He's seeing even further than them just coming back out of exile after being punished, after being disciplined for their sins, stuff like that. He's seeing something way out there in the future, which we find out about the New Testament. And some of these verses that we read, you kind of hear them in the New Testament too, particularly related to John the Baptist, who comes and starts announcing, about the Messiah is going to come, that God's going to come save his people. And so we see that this prophecy is fulfilled eventually in Jesus. We're going to talk more about that, but that's what you need to kind of know, that understand this whole thing. The prophecies are always pointing out, they're concrete historical events are taking place, but it's always looking forward to the ultimate history, which is Jesus Christ coming. And then, of course, it looks even beyond that to his second coming, when he's going to come too. But we're going to look at, particularly today, his first coming, that this is getting at. So another thing I want to sort of point out here, when it talks about here in verse 7, this is kind of, again, just sort of background before we dive in, is that verse 7 says, how beautiful on the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news. That is a great song, too, that we sing about our God reigning. But the imagery there of, it would be unfamiliar to us because we don't really totally think that way. We might have grown up in the church and heard this, but what they're talking about is when they say on the mountains, literally, and some of you guys probably seen the movie The Lord of the Rings, or read those books and stuff. And so there's this awesome scene in Lord of the Rings where one kingdom, I don't remember which one it is.
Is Gondor or Rohan?
Yeah, it's basically crying out for help, right? And so they have this system of torches that they kind of light, and then that torch is seen on another mountain, they light a torch, and so that goes all the way to the kingdom. Eventually that's their way of communicating, right? So to communicate from one kingdom to the other before all the technology that we have now. Well, in these days, literally to communicate, they would send couriers, people that were running, right, with the message, with the news about the communication of we need help, or something's happened in the battle, this is what happened, we lost, or we won. Okay, so this imagery of beautiful feet is coming from that. Okay, is that when the messenger was running and he had good news, then the way that the metaphor they used for that was his feet are beautiful because he's carrying this beautiful, awesome news. Okay, and so that's what this is talking about there when it talks about his feet, that they're beautiful. That's a great word. They're beautiful, and so the first point that we're going to kind of talk about here in the beginning here is that the good news of the gospel is beautiful. Okay, and it's so beautiful that it has to be sung. That it can't just be spoken or sort of obeyed, or that it should be a song in our heart. Okay, that we should be able to feel, okay, what we believe about Jesus and what he's done. We should understand it clearly, but that understanding ought to lead to not just, I know more than you, or I'm more confident in how I understand things. That's great. We need to know what we believe. We need to feel what we believe. We need to have joy in our hearts, and that's what makes it contagious for other people. Okay, is that joy, because there's a beauty that we have understood. And so we see this in verses 8 and 9. If you look there, when it's talking about the imagery that's used there, these watchmen. These watchmen will wait on the walls. They see the messenger coming, and it says that they lift up their voice together. They sing for joy. They're singing for joy at this news that's coming about God. It says, for eye to eye they see the return of the Lord to Zion, in verse 9. Break forth together into singing, you waste places. The Lord has comforted his people. Okay, so this is talking about singing, about this tremendous good news. As I mentioned before, what he's talking about particularly is that after, Israel, Judah, they were in this situation of just desolation. And so some of the passages before, some of the verses before what we just read, the Lord is kind of reflecting over them. If you look in verse 3, the Lord says this, you were sold for nothing, and you shall be redeemed without money. Thus says the Lord God, my people went down at first into Egypt, and that's talking about another kind of time of discipline and suffering, to sojourn there, and the Assyrian oppressed them for nothing. Now therefore, what have I here, declares the Lord, seeing that my people are taken away for nothing. Their rulers wail, declares the Lord, and continually all the day my name is despised. Therefore my people shall know my name. Therefore in that day they shall know that it is I who speak. So he speaks about a people that are just down. It uses the word nothing. Okay, they were sold for nothing. I mean, there's a sense in which God's people that are receiving this are feeling totally worthless because they have been brought to such a low place in their lives as a discipline, as a punishment for their sin. And so when they hear that there is redemption, when they hear that there's salvation, there's joy that begins to break out. And so as we think about the beauty of the good news of the gospel, that it has to be sung, one of the things that we need to understand here is that God's people here in our passage, he says to them, he says in verse 6, therefore my people shall know my name. In that day they shall know that it is I who speak. Here am I. This talks to us about something that's important, which is that he talks about it's my people. And that's talking about those that have been, let's say, in the church, okay? And I don't know how many of you guys, kind of what, I know everybody has coming from different backgrounds. Some people come up in the church, some people just kind of checking things out and not been around that. But what this is teaching us is that it's possible to be around the Bible, Christian things. It's possible to know a lot of facts about God and about Jesus and not know him. That's what he's saying. He said, my people, they're going to know me. Well, you ask, why don't they know you? And what this teaches us is that for somebody to know God, he's got to do it. He's saying, here am I. They're going to know me. Why? Because they're going to start doing what's right, and then I'm going to move towards them? No. It's because I'm going to make it happen, is what he said. Amen. They're going to know me because I'm going to do it. And that is part of the beauty of the gospel, is that it's not about us. It's not about the religious things that we do to make God move towards us. The beauty of the gospel and the beauty of what is true Christianity is that we're not sort of Christianity is not just a whole list of things that we do to make us get closer to God. Christianity is all about what God has done to come and be close to us. Because in his heart is a song. In his heart is joy. In his heart is a love for his people. And he said, I want to know you, and I want you to know me. And I'm going to do that. And so this passage is full of that initiative of God, moving towards a nothing people, a worthless people, a people that are just eating, their mouth is full of the gravel of their own choices and things that they've done. Okay, the sense of desolation is what's used here. Okay, this is how they feel. And justly so, because the way they've lived their lives, the way they've rejected him. Okay, the idolatry specifically. Idolatry is just when you are worshiping something that's not God. Right? And so, well, I'm not Hindu, I don't have idols in my house. But we have idols in our hearts. In my own case, I grew up in a home in which I looked at my dad. He had this tremendously successful when he did. And that led me, and I've kind of had a chance to reflect on this over my life. What I realized is at one point is that I was just so driven, to perform. And in my mind, I thought, I want to have people say about me what people say about my dad. He's good at this, he's successful. And I think that's probably a struggle that many people have, just in general, that sense of performing and doing something to perform to gain, something. Well, it took me a while, but I was in a job in ministry, and I'd worked with college students, with high school students. I was in part of a large church, and God had blessed the ministry. But I got to a point where I realized I was kind of coming up against a wall, and my teaching began to lack conviction. I was kind of losing rapport with kids, and so my supervisor came to me and said, I'm going to sit you down for a while, because I don't know what's going on with you, but I'm not going to fire you. But you need to really reflect on what is your understanding of the gospel. Are you really understanding the good news of the gospel? It's not coming across. What's coming across is a lot of, you guys better do this, and also just kind of lifting up yourself. And man, with what I've told you about my, kind of my ideal was I'm going to achieve success. Well, this was the exact opposite. I was getting sat down. And I'll never forget. This pastor was so gracious to me, but he sat me down. And after a while, I got to a place with the help of my wife, who has taught me so much about the gospel that, more than any person. And I remember just coming to a place and realizing I'm a total failure, and yet they're not firing me. And I remember just praying to God. Chris talked about me praying. I remember this prayer. Lord, I'm a total failure. And he's like, finally you understand? It just kind of came into my, finally? Yeah, I know Lord. That's why I came. Because I love failures. And I had never got that. That was the beginning of me hearing the music. I realized, you know what? Because what happened was, I was, in my ministry, I was using the ministry as an idol. The rapport with people, success from that, a sense of, he's good at that or whatever. That was my God. That was what I was looking to. And the great thing about Jesus is that with a smile, he comes to you and says, I'm going to rip that out of you. I'm going to take that out of you. I'm going to break that from you because I love you. And you are made for so much more, let me just say, than that. You're made for me. I've got riches for you. I want you to know me. That's keeping you from knowing me. And so when we talk about this passage, which I mentioned about the punishment of Israel, their discipline, you know what? God disciplines those he loves. So I just want to, on this particular point, just say, I don't know where you are in your life, what you're struggling with. As you even hear me talking about things, what stuff maybe pops up in your mind, and you say, I'm going to be not before God. I just want to just say that part of you coming to understand the beauty of the gospel is going to be having that broken. Okay? And I want to encourage you not to be afraid of that. I want to encourage you to lean into that and actually invite God. And that's the other thing. One of the things I was praying all those years, Chris saw me, I was saying, I don't have joy. God, I want you to give me joy. Ooh, be careful what you pray. Because part of me coming to have joy was getting fired, almost fired, being brought low. All right? And so, but I want to encourage you that, there is nothing better than beginning to hear. Jesus loves you and being able to walk to that music. He loves me. It's not about my performance in any way, shape, or form. It's not about what other people say about me or if I've got approval here or there. No. It's because he loves me. And he's got a purpose for me. And I'm free in that love. That's what makes your heart sing. And so, in this particular passage, this song that they're singing is a song of deliverance. I don't know how many of you guys have seen the movie Unbroken, but there's this tremendous, this is a movie about a guy who's a prisoner of war in Japan. He'd been shipwrecked, or his plane crashed in the ocean. The Japanese captured him and his friend, put him in a concentration camp, POW camp. They were tortured and beaten terribly. And in this particular, one of the last camp that he went to, they were mining coal, for the Japanese war effort. And so in the movie, you see them, and they're just, all these guys are just beaten down. They're emaciated. They have just coal all over them. So their eyes are just completely black. And you just see their white eyes because they have the soot all over their bodies. And there's this tremendous scene in which they are always in fear of being executed by the Japanese. And the Japanese one day say, we're giving you a special privilege today. We're going to take you all, so you all get to go out to the river and take a bath. And so all of them are thinking, this is it. They're going to execute us. Because their way of saying, we're going to give you something, they knew they were so diabolical and something, they had something else in mind. And so they march them out there. And they're all on the sort of edge of this river. And they tell them, and they have no shirts on, they're just totally black with soot. They tell them, march out into the river. And all the Japanese are around them with guns. All the guard around are standing. And so they believe that their death sentence are pronounced and they're getting ready to get executed by firing squad. And so then there's this rumble. There's this rumble overhead of these planes. And they look up, and it's these U.S. bombers that are coming over. And they're announcing the end of the war, that it's ending. And so those, rather than get executed and killed, the Japanese just drop their rifles and just all start running. Because they know that they're going to be tried as prisoners, war criminals and stuff like that. And what happens is, this scene that is what we have in this passage of just jubilation. Jubilation, freedom, redemption. And they just get in the water and that soot just comes off and they're singing. Because why? Because they were free. And they knew what it was to be oppressed, to be down, to be broken. I mean, their movie's unbroken. But they were broken. They've been beaten and broken. And I just want to say that that's where we go. This is how we discover the joy of freedom, the freedom that we have and what Jesus has done for us on the cross. We discover through brokenness. You know, one of the things that we've done in Peru is our missionary team started a home for abused teenage girls. And so they're taken to custody by the police because they're pregnant. So they're pregnant, they have their babies while they're with us, and we take care of them and their children. A lot of times they're pregnant from rape, incest, these kinds of things. And one of the things, and so we have a chance to just share the gospel with them, love them, they become part of the life of the church. And but one of the things that they love to do the most is to sing. Is when they begin to understand the gospel. And it's beginning, it's seeds, there's so much pain and stuff there. But the thing that they love to do the most is sing those songs. It's like it's part of their healing, is to be able to sing about what Christ has done. Content, going through Bible studies with them, we do all that, they learn things. But the thing they love to do the most is to sing. Because they've understood something about what Jesus can do for a life that's broken by sin and the damage that sin does to somebody. They have that deep in their hearts. So this good news of the gospel must be beautiful to us. For it to be beautiful to us, we have to understand our own sin and be broken by it. And then the song and the freedom that comes with the gospel sets us free with a joy that we can not have any other way. The second point is this message of the gospel is delivered in the flesh. This passage here talks about Jesus, the Lord says in these different verses, verse 6, "Here am I," says the Lord. Verse 8, "With their eyes, they're going to see me eye to eye, face to face." They saw the Lord as he returned to Zion. Verse 9, "The Lord has comforted his people. The Lord," verse 10, "has bared his holy arm." John the Baptist came preaching repentance, in anticipation of God coming, and he preached that into the wilderness, and people had to come out to him in the wilderness to hear that message. But he was preparing, the Bible tells us, the way of the Lord. The way of the Lord. And so, in John 1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word," verse 14, "and the Word became flesh." And so, God, to tell us that he loves us, and that he has provided for us to redeem us, to save us, to free us from our sins, doesn't say that from up in the mountain. He doesn't say that from up in heaven. He doesn't just send us a letter, though he does give us his word. He actually comes himself. And what I said before about in order to know him, he has to make himself known to us. And he wants to do that. He comes after us. And the gospel is that he physically came to us in the flesh to show us his love, to communicate his love to us, and to give us the love that we needed. And the only way that we could receive that love was for him to do that. He came into the waste places. He came into our desolation. He was a man of sorrows, a man of suffering. Jesus came with this good news of the gospel of salvation, of redemption, of freedom from sin. And he entered into our reality as a man. 100% God, 100% man. And this passage here talks about, in verse 10, the Lord has bared his holy arm, it says. You know, before the eyes of all the nations. I don't know if you guys have seen the football players now. When they have their uniforms on, they have their arms, like a little tight like this. You guys ever seen that? They're showing their arms. And so I kind of looked at that and I wondered, I always just sort of assumed it's because they were trying to show off how strong they were. But really what it is if you notice, they've got them on so tight, it's so that someone can't grab them. Okay? And so that someone can't, so there's nothing for somebody to grab to hold them up from running. Okay? And so, in that sense, it's rolling them up so that they can better battle in the game and fight and be able to have victory. And so, when you see this imagery here about the Lord bearing his holy arm, that's the image you need to have. Is that Jesus, when you see Jesus coming in the flesh, you just see God with his strength being shown. And the Bible talks about this in Colossians chapter 2. I'm going to read a verse for us there in Colossians chapter 2, verses 13 through 15. And he talks about when Jesus came, the tremendous strength that he showed on our behalf. says, "And you who were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with him, having forgiven us all our trespasses by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, and nailing it to the cross, he disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him." When you see Jesus Christ on the cross, when you know that he's gone there, we don't see only weakness. We see brokenness. We see a man there suffering. But what this passage tells us is we see Jesus Christ disarming the devil, destroying him, crushing him, the Lord bearing his holy arm. Why? Because Jesus Christ came in the flesh, and he never sinned. And what God requires of us as men and women is that we do what he says, that we obey him. But the Bible tells us that every single one of us has fallen short of that. Every single one of us has not obeyed God. Every single one of us has idols. Okay, we've broken the first commandment and all the other commandments. We don't do what the Lord says. Okay? And so, therefore, the wages of sin, the Bible tells us, is death. That we have to die. But Jesus' great strength was his holiness. Was the fact that he never disobeyed God. He came as a man and he obeyed him perfectly. And so when you look at him on the cross, you just see strength of will to resist temptation, to reject it, and to completely obey God. That's tremendous strength. What else? He's there as a man, and he's suffering as though he had sinned. The Bible tells us that he who knew no sin actually became sin for us. Jesus became sin on the cross. He became whose sin? Mine and yours. And so on the cross, his arm is bared because he's bearing the weight of all the sin of the world, his people. He's perfect, totally sinless. But on the cross, he's bearing on his shoulders the sin of the world. And in that act on the cross, he's destroying the devil and destroying the hold that he has on us. Because he can't say, "God, look what he's done. He deserves hell. She deserves hell for this." And what God can say is, that's true. But my strong son came and lived a perfect life for her, for him. And he also paid the price that they owe. He took it all. Therefore, they're mine. Because my arm was bared in my son, and I destroyed you. Now they're mine. And I love them, and they're mine not just because I've looked the other way at what they've done, but because it's fully been paid for, what they did. And they're fully righteous. And it's not that they're now living their life to try to keep that up. No. All of the righteousness of Jesus Christ now is theirs for those who believe and see Jesus say, "That's the one for me. He's the Savior." And I believe. And the Bible tells us that's the gospel. That's the good news. Is that when you believe in Jesus, all of that righteousness comes to you personally. And that death on the cross now is yours. That's done. There's no condemnation for you by a simple act of believing. And you see how that's a song. Okay? And you see how that's tremendous strength. And you see how Jesus had to come in the flesh. He had to be the 100% God, 100% man, the God-man. Okay? Because the Spirit can't save flesh and blood. He needed to become a man. And this passage is telling us that that's exactly what he did. And in the passage where it talks about beautiful feet, Paul later on picks that expression up in Romans chapter 10. And he says about the person who's bearing this message of the gospel, how beautiful are the feet of him who brings good news. And now he's not just talking about the redemption of Israel from Babylon, or the good news that John the Baptist was saying, "Hey, Jesus is here." Now he's talking about the good news of the gospel, that it's been paid, the price has been paid. This message that I'm preaching, that you're hearing week by week, that now is born to the nations. Okay? And everyone who has that message in their heart and who bears it on their lips, their feet are beautiful. They're bringing that gospel where it needs to go. Because the world is dying without this message. The religions of the world hold people in slavery, saying, "You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this." But really what's holding them in slavery is the devil. Because that's what he promotes. Because he promotes everything that will keep a person from understanding and hearing the good news of the gospel. And so the people that then bear that through the preaching of the gospel have beautiful feet as well. And that's why the heart of God in this passage, that Paul picks it up and preaches it and says, this is why we do missions. Because this beautiful, most excellent, greatest news has to be told. But it has to be told by people that go in the flesh. Okay, it's not just something that we're going to broadcast, although we do that, but there's got to be somebody relating it to you personally, talking about it, sharing about it. I heard an interesting statistic yesterday, listening to a sermon, where, have you guys heard of the 1040 window? 1040 window is 10 degrees, between 10 degrees latitude, 40 degrees latitude. Okay, it goes across the north latitude, across the globe. And in that, between those two lines of latitude, exists the majority of the people being not reached by the gospel. This would include the country of India, China, much of parts of Africa, places where it's all Hindu, Muslim, Chinese, atheist, secular. And this particular guy was saying that the statistics are that there are probably about 40,000 missionaries in that 1040 window. That, I mean, there's literally millions of people that have never heard the gospel, never heard what the Bible is, never even heard anything about Jesus. And so that's a target for missionaries, for missions, to say, we got to reach that. And many, all over the world, not just from the U.S., but other countries are sending missionaries into that 1040 window. And there's about 40,000 are there. But what he said was, there's about 2 million expatriate Americans working in those countries in just secular jobs. Okay? And so what his point was that in the history of the Christian church, the gospel, if you look at Acts, the gospel always spread not by the clergy people, but by just the people in the churches. Okay? The people with different professions, vocations, were going places and just living different places. And there, we don't know how, like the church in Rome, no one knows how it started. Okay, there wasn't an apostle that went there. All there just were churches everywhere, different houses. Okay, and Paul eventually writes them a letter, and that's how it spread. And I say that to you guys because when you think about you growing in the gospel, understanding, believing the gospel, and beginning to say, what does it mean for me to have beautiful things, to take that gospel to people? That does not necessarily mean that you're becoming a full-time missionary. But what it should mean is that gospel is changing your life. That it's on the edge of your lips all the time. And that if God calls you to be an engineer, if he calls you to do this or that, that wherever you go, you're going to be rubbing shoulders with people that need to hear that message. And that's the mentality that we have to have. This news is not just for me. It's for others. It's free to me. It's beautiful. I'm growing in it. And it's for others. And that's part of my calling. And that just leads me to the final point, which is that this message comes in the flesh. It's so beautiful as we sung, but it's also for everybody. And I've already got into that. This particular word it uses here in verse 10, the Lord has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. The ends of the earth. So the idea is that when God gives us this good news of Jesus Christ and what he's done on the cross, that his intention always was for that to be for all peoples, from everywhere, the ends of the earth, okay, to all nations. And Israel never quite understood that. They always kind of thought it was just for us. We have our temple, and so, but God had designed the temple that had 3 courts. Okay, and one of the courts, the outer court, what they call the outer court, but they call it the court of the nations. Okay, and God had told him to make it that way, and that was the place where the Gentiles, the non-Jews, could come and worship. And the whole point of having the temple in Israel in the middle of all the nations was that the nations would come and worship, and they never quite got that. And so that's why Jesus got so angry when he went into the temple and he saw them selling animals. You guys heard that story? Selling animals and changing money in there. They were doing that in the temple for the Gentiles, okay, in the outer court. So that there's all these camels are making this noise, and the money changers are yelling and hawking, their stuff. And so the nations can't worship, and that's why Jesus got so mad. Because this good news is for them. He wanted them to know him as well as the Jews. And so, and the blessing that God gives to Abraham is he said, I'm going to bless you so that you can be a blessing to the nations. That's from the very beginning of Genesis 12. So this message here that Isaiah is saying, this salvation is going to be seen by everybody. It's for all nations. It's for all the peoples of the world. And so I want to ask you, what is your vision for the church? Okay, what is your vision for for the church that you participated, that you go to right now? Is it a vision of the nations coming? Is it a vision of you being a part of seeing that somebody who's different, who's a down and out kind of person, a person who maybe is different from you? Because the Jews would have understood this word, the nations, as anybody that's not us. It's not like us. And they would have actually understood it as nations that need to be judged because they've done bad things to us. Okay? And so they have this, really this attitude of separation. And oftentimes that can be subtly part of how we operate and think as well. But this passage challenges us to say, no. The intention of the gospel, this good news of the gospel, is that it goes to all people. Okay? And that people who are different, that are strange, that are from other nations, that there's some way or another that God would have me figure out a way to have them be part of this too. And so that oftentimes comes back to just a simple understanding of this message. If I understand myself to be strange, if I understand myself to be broken, if I understand myself to be somebody who never deserved this, that helps me begin to view other people differently. And the vision of the church that we need to have is a house for all the nations. And when I say nations, I mean people from other language groups. But I also say people that are just different. And I think our vision for the church should be my ideal vision of the church is that you have a church where you have people coming from all over the place, that the community is being loved, that you have people who are homeless that feel free to come in there, that a person who's a prostitute, there's a sense in which if they come, people are not just going to separate and move away. There's going to be a sense of there's a beauty to those people of love that is attractive to everybody. That's the gospel. Okay, that it is to be attractive. And so I want us to end with this tonight, to ask you, is the gospel attractive to you? Maybe you just kind of have questions about it. That's great. So this is going to be an awesome time to explore, to talk about those things. But is it making your heart sing? Or do you find yourself just kind of dry? And I want to encourage you that if you find yourself without joy, dry, to say, just to make it your prayer, Lord, this week you meet with me. Because I know that's not your will for me. I want to have joy. And I want to understand what you've done on the cross really be creating a joy in me that's contagious and it moves me towards others. That's the theme of this week, is that as we understand the gospel, it moves us out. Because God is moving. His kingdom is moving everywhere. And as we think about God coming to us as the great missionary, and to initiate, to say, I want you to be in my family, then we understand that we're going to get brought up in that. We're going to get caught up in that too. We're going to have a sense of, I'm going to move. And so definitely that's going to mean this week, you moving towards other people here. Right? And thinking about who's kind of outside the circle that I can move towards. That's the way the love of God works. And so let me pray for us today. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for your word. Thank you for this great news of the gospel. And that, Lord, you've done the work. You've moved towards us. You rejoice over us with singing. And I want to pray that our fellowship here in these days, Lord, would be a fellowship of singing, of increasing joy. And that, Lord, that people will be brought towards the center. And those that are kind of feeling like they're on the edges will be brought towards the center. And it wouldn't be just because we're being nice, it would be because you're in the center. And you're working in us and pulling us together. And giving us a vision also to move us out of ourselves and towards other people. With an increasing freedom, because we're understanding that we can't fail. Because you've taken our failure on the cross. And you now fill us with a spirit who gives us joy, who gives us love, who gives us power, and gives us freedom. And I pray that you would do that this weekend. And I ask that in Jesus' name. Amen.